Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Legacy Open in Worcester, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside Rudy Briksza. How you doing, sir?
Doing all right, doing all right.
Now, you told me on Twitter you had a spicy one.
I do?
And then you show up playing Food Chain. A deck I have known for quite a while, and for anyone who has followed Legacy has seen kind of the evolution of this deck.
Yep.
It started out a long time ago. People were using, the Mist Holograph Food Chain engine for all kinds of funny things. Yeah. Whether it be Genesis Hydra for your deck.
Tidespout Tyrant is great.
Tyrant, bounce all your permanents. Elite Cassis came along and started doing the Fierce Empath Emrakul thing.
Right.
And then the latest set brought us Walking Ballista, a whole new bag of tricks to add to your Food Chain goodies.
Yeah, I actually had a status about a month and a half into Standard of Aether Revolt, after Aether Revolt came out, and I said my favorite part about Walking Ballista is how easily it just slides into every deck. And here it's just easily slid in, and it's taken the place of Fierce Empath plus Emrakul for me. One of my biggest problems with Emrakul in general is you draw it, and it's just this 15 mana card that you're never putting into play without Food Chain. Walking Ballista, on the other hand, sometimes a 4 mana 2/2, as weird as that sounds, is sometimes just way too good for a lot of decks to handle. Decks like Death and Taxes have kind of morphed into this X1 strategy. So Walking Ballista is really good at mowing down a lot of their creatures. Young Pyromancer, Delver. The list of X1s goes on, and even against Miracles, pressure their Jace, pressure their creatures. It makes it really hard for them to interact with you, even if you just pump a counter on it every turn.
I've taken this deck for a few spins in our local Legacy, and the amount of times you play 4 mana 2/2 to burn them out, to shock or just kill a Deathrite Shaman or something.
Right.
Having the Ballista instead of a Emrakul, like you said, is often very relevant.
Right.
Then, of course, let's take a look at the rest of the deck. This is another one of these Soul Tie decks that gets to take advantage of Leovold, one of the top cards this weekend that's just showing up in all the decks. So whether it's the 4-color control deck, Soul Tie Delver, Alurin, now Food Chain also gets to reap the rewards of having Leovold in the deck.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive. When the card first came out, I realized that the card was very powerful, but I didn't realize how good the card actually is. It makes so many board states so hard to navigate. If you have a Leovold or your opponent has a Leovold, all of your draw spells are awful. All of your removal spells, are no longer a 1-for-1. They're now, a 1-for-1.5 because they get to draw a card out of it.
There's almost no matchup where Leovold doesn't come down and make a huge impact, because either your opponent's doing a lot of cantripping, they're messing with your lands in some fashion, or they're pointing like burn spells or discard spells at you, all of which triggers Leovold. Yep. So you're coming out ahead in all of these interactions. And in this deck, which gets to kind of play as a dinky little creature deck on the times when you're not comboing, it kind of adds to that effect as well. Yeah, it definitely helps keep a lot of pressure. As you said, a lot of the creatures in this deck are kind of on the weaker side, and that's, kind of the backdraw to playing a deck like this. You don't have a card like Tarmogoyf, which just slams people really hard. You don't have a card like Delver, which can get out of control, has evasion. It's really tough. Instead, you're playing this 4 mana 3/3 with flying and Baleful Strix, and sometimes putting pressure on your opponent is not really that easy when, without a Food Chain in play. Sometimes you just have 2 creatures and you're like, it's attacking for 2. Yeah. It can easily get kind of out-tempoed in those matchups. Yep. But in the other matchups where inevitability is the king, the deck with the endless amount of 3/3 flyers is usually the one that's going to come out on top. Oh yeah, I've had multiple. I've been playing online a lot, and a lot of my Miracles opponents are, if I have a Food Chain in play and a Mist Hologriffin, are just at a loss of what to do. Especially game 1, they're like, Terminus you, and you're like, all right, I will exile all of my Mist Hologriffins, and they're like, yep, go, and you're like, all right, recast all of my Mist Hologriffins, and they're like, again. Yeah. Well, they'll be back. We also get the addition of Eternal Scourge from, Eldritch Moon. This is a card that's kind of like your 4th Mist Hologriffin, but it has upside in the fact that it's 1 mana cheaper than Mist Hologriffin, so you can sort of do your combo Scourge into Griffin a mana earlier. Right. It also kind of has the advantages against, creatures with pro color, against Death and Taxes and things like that. It's real good at blocking Mirren Crusader. There's a lot of swords out of Death and Taxes, and while Death and Taxes is a favorable matchup, Sword of Fire and Ice can completely turn you on your side. Even the black-green one Feast and Famine as well takes care of this deck as well, because your Griffins no longer do anything, and all your ground creatures don't do anything. It definitely can be an issue. And Eternal Scourge is just really good. It's also really good against Mother of Runes, but sometimes a 3/3 is just
bigger than a lot of creatures in Legacy. You know, Young Pyromancer's a 2/1, it makes a bunch of 1/1s. Deathrite Shaman's a 1/2, it doesn't block very well. And if Eternal Scourge dies, you don't really care that much.
Yeah.
You know, same with Misthollow Griffin. Your creatures die, and you're like, all right, well, I'll just recur them at some point in time.
When your creatures die, you don't mind. Deathrite Shaman brings them right back to exile, and then you get to continue it all again.
I'm also playing a Trinket Mage package.
Yeah. Going to bring that up next, because this kind of plays the role of Fierce Empath played before for your Gurmag Angler, you know, Emrakul. Now you're going down the chain with Trinket Mage to get your Ballista and your package that you have in the main and the side.
Yep, and the package in the main deck is a Relic of Progenitus, which is obviously very good. There's a lot of Deathrite mirrors. Like everywhere I look, there's just a Deathrite, Deathrite, Deathrite. Relic is just one of the best cards at eating out your opponent's yard, and also keeping your yard free from their attacks. And it also lets you trade off your Scourge, trade off your Misthollow Griffin, and just eat it, put it right back into exile for another go.
We see that in the Skred Red deck in Modern that actually uses that as a real engine.
Right.
You also have EE as your other option in the main deck to get with Trinket Mage, just kind of just blowing up problem permanents.
Yep. 4-color Delver can sometimes be an issue, but they do settle on a lot of ones. Delver and Deathrite are some of their best threats, and Engineered Explosives just takes them right out. But it also takes care of other problematic permanents. Sometimes it Entreat the Angels, and you just play it for 0, clean their board. It takes care of Counterbalance, since you can play it for a large amount, but keep your Sunburst at 2, so you avoid Counterbalance, you're able to take care of it. But every once in a while, it's just, there's a lot of things that you need to take care of, and EE is good at backing you up there.
Right, it's a nice addition to this deck that kind of gives you another route to a win condition, also give you some answers. Then this is of course a blue deck, so you have all your goodies, Force of Will, Ponder, Brainstorm, you have Abrupt Decay as an answer, but then I think my favorite card in the deck to cast is Manipulate Fate. Your opponent always has to read it, and then you effectively draw 4 cards off of it.
Yep, I know we kind of disagree on the amount that should be played. We were talking earlier, you're a big fan of playing more than 2, but I kind of settled on 2. I'm a firm believer 1 is great, just exile 3. The second one, maybe not so good once you start eating out all your exile, but the card is definitely a necessary inclusion, and it just helps, you know, make your deck very consistent.
Right. Moving to the sideboard, you have some other cards that go along with your Trinket Mage package. So you have Anile Spellbomb, Pithing Needle, and then Altar of the Brood. This is a good one right here.
Oh, yeah.
What are we doing here?
Oh, so a lot of, probably one of the best sideboard cards in Legacy is Pithing Needle. And Pithing Needle is very good at stopping your Walking Ballista. While it can't stop Food Chain because it's a mana ability, Pithing Needle does take care of Walking Ballista, same as Null Rod, same as Phyrexian Revoker. Altar of the Brood offers you an alternate win condition for a lot of that. Sometimes your opponent might play Leyline of Sanctity. Sometimes it's so cheap and efficient that you're just like, all right, play this Altar, you know, if I phase in this Griffin, phase in this Scourge, mill you out, and your opponent's like, I'm sorry, what's going on?
Yeah. They didn't plan for that line of attack.
No.
And while Pithing Needle does shut down, you know, machine gunning them with Walking Ballista, you still get to just play a giant creature when that is in play.
The other day, I had a Food Chain in play, and they needled my Ballista, and I was like, here's a 20/20, go. And they're like, oh, that's still good. I'm going to go ahead and leave you alone now.
We still have the Abyss here, so have fun dealing with that. Other cards, you know, we have Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, Surgical Extraction. These are kind of your anti-combo measures along with Flusterstorm.
Yep. Combo can be a rough matchup. Sometimes it is a race, and Thoughtseize, Surgical, Flusterstorm kind of help alleviate some of the pressure that the combo decks can put on you.
Right. This deck doesn't quite have the speed to kind of work against Show and Tell.
Right.
You know, some of the super degenerate turn 1 decks.
Yep. As I've kind of told a bunch of people, even though it is a combo deck, you're really this kind of mid-range deck with a combo backup.
Then Golgari Charm's your other option, along with Carpet of Flowers. Carpet gives you kind of this mana advantage. Carpet of Flowers is just your answer to a lot of problems.
Yep, I bring in a couple copies against Delver and Miracles, and it just helps you keep pace because they're so, since all their CMCs are so low and they're so efficient and low to the ground, Carpet of Flowers helps you keep pace with all of them, and sometimes it just helps you play a large Ballista. I played a Ballista for 5 last weekend just because I had Carpet of Flowers in play, and that was way too much for my opponent to beat.
Yeah, all these creatures, or all these small creatures are not going to be able to compete when you can just turn out a Ballista that is a real threat.
Yeah, beat a true name with a Jitte with Walking Ballista.
Not bad. All right, so is there anything you're kind of missing this weekend, or you kind of wish you would have in this deck? Because there's a lot of options you can do with this deck in the sideboard, and what you choose to kind of do in your main deck, whether you want the Trinket Mage or anything else.
So I've been testing the deck a lot on Moto, and I have Duresses on Moto because burn is very cheap, so it's everywhere. So I usually have Duress. but I always cut Duress for Thoughtseize in real play because there's a lot less burn. Twice in 2 tournaments, I have cut Duress for Thoughtseize and played burn round 1.
I know some of the sideboards run around with Hydroblast, mainly for that matchup.
Yeah.
But if you're going to try to like hedge against one deck to free up more sideboard slots, most people kind of come around to Hydroblast being the weakest one.
Right, for sure, and I definitely agree with that. Burn is never popular enough that I want to, go in with Hydroblast, which is such really a narrow card.
All right. But the deck's great. It's gotten a lot of new tools from Fatal Push to Walking Ballista and Eternal Scourge. This is one of those decks that you kind of revisit every couple years. There's more tools at your disposal.
Oh yeah, and maybe we'll get better and better creatures as time goes on. I know Wizards really likes printing good creatures.
Yep.
so this deck will probably just get better as time goes on, but we'll see what kind of evolution it takes next.
All right, Rudy, thanks for joining me here on the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Worcester.